And the hardest part was finally, after 53 years of getting rid of that dark cloud that surrounded me and followed me, that fear of death, Trikafta, the new drug, eliminated that. And I had a choice.
Welcome to the first episode of Share Your Story with Syma. So, your story, obviously, I saw your status. I think it was a comment that you posted on a page, on Cystic Fibrosis page, and I noticed you had wrote something about that you actually beat the coronavirus.
Yes.
And for me, I was like, wow, because for someone having such a severe health condition and something like coronavirus, so severe, and both of them, you would have thought that somebody like yourself would find it difficult, would actually not beat it. Hence, of course, I reached out to you and thought, wow, I really, really am interested in this story, and it would be an honor for me to have this as my first story, being a positive, because at the moment there's so much negativity around the world. So what I would like to do, we are going to touch upon coronavirus and how you managed to beat it. But first of all, what I want and what my audience would want is to first understand what is cystic fibrosis. So I'll let you carry on.
Okay, thank you. I want to say to you, I am very humbled and honored to be on your show. And I want to thank you for the educational platform that you are providing for the world. When I was born, people didn't know about CF. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your work.
That means a lot to me. Thank you. We want to understand your health condition first. So what my viewers would like to know is, what is cystic fibrosis?
Cystic fibrosis is a genetic defect that is inherited from each parent. So each parent passes a CF gene onto the child, and the defect results in problems with the way the sodium chloride in your cells is transported. And because of that defect, the sodium chloride cannot rise to the surface of the cell correctly. And instead of having normal mucus that a person without CF has, where that normal mucus is healthy and helps to lubricate the body with a thin shield of lubricant, in people having cystic fibrosis, the mucus in our body becomes very thick and sticky and infected due to the defect in the protein. And because of that complication, the organs affected in our body include the lungs, the digestive system, including the pancreas, the reproductive system, the sinuses, the gallbladder, the liver. All of those organs can be infected by this thick, sticky mucus. And that is what causes all of the complications and the symptoms that follow.
Wow. So both parents have to be a carrier of that specific gene?
Correct. So each parent has to be a carrier, and then there's only a 1 in 4 chance that their child will be born with the disease CF. Wow. So there are many families. I actually just met a woman last week, one of 11 siblings, and she's the only person or only child with CF.
Wow, that's interesting. So it doesn't have to be all children will have CF. It's just 1 in 4 chances.
Yes, correct. So my best friend with CF, she has 2 sisters. One has CF and one does not. So that 25% chance is what causes the outcome.
Right. Okay. So the that we've got a bit of understanding about CF, so I just want to ensure that I understand it as well. So it's thick, sticky mucus that gives you that daily struggle. So if I'm right, that thick, sticky mucus is in your lungs, which means it affects your breathing.
Correct. So it is primarily and most dangerous in your lungs, because that is what causes most deaths. So instead of having the normal lubricant, your cells produce this very thick mucus, and then you get into this vicious cycle. And that is, thick, sticky mucus attracts bacteria. So instead of expelling the bacteria globs onto it. And the more bacteria you have, the more infection you have. The more infection, the more inflammation of your airways. The more inflammation, the more infection, and the more infection, the more mucus. So you get in this vicious cycle of symptoms, which causes shortness of breath. It causes you to produce massive amounts of mucus that clogs all of your airways. So you can imagine how difficult it is to breathe. That leads to scarring. So the more the bacteria and mucus sits in your lungs, you get bronchiectasis and scarring that is probably not reversible.
Thank you for sharing and educating myself and my viewers on cystic fibrosis. Now we would like to know your journey of cystic fibrosis. So how was you diagnosed and how long have you had it for? And then you can start telling me about your daily routine and your medication as well.
Okay, so before we start, I'll tell you a little bit about my journey in terms of decades. I'm 54 years old, and I'll say that. Each decade was a little bit different, and then I'll tell you about my daily regimen. Okay?
Yeah, brilliant. That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want me just to start?
Yeah.
With my journey? Okay. Okay.
Connection. Yeah. Yeah. You can start.
Okay. I have a very interesting diagnosis story. I was actually born a twin, and unfortunately my twin sister died at 16 days of age from a CF complication called meconium ileus, and that was a bowel blockage at birth. And she was tested, and she died from CF. And apparently I was tested at that time, but it did not come back as a positive diagnosis of CF. And so for the first 8 years of my life, I was undiagnosed. And then at age 8, I was very malnourished. So without proper enzymes, also with CF, it affects your digestive system. And that mucus blocks the ducts in your digestive tract so that enzymes cannot digest your food appropriately. And so I weighed 37 pounds. I was 8 years old. I was malnourished. I had no energy. I had orange oil pouring out of my body 24 hours a day because of the fats not being absorbed. And my mother found out through a relative about a doctor an hour away who treated people with CF. And she wrote him a letter. And the day that he got the letter, he called my mom. And I was admitted several days later into the hospital. And again, I was tested using a sweat chloride test, which is still the way many people are diagnosed. And that test did come back very positive that I did have CF. So with the sweat chloride test, it's interesting that any number above 60 is considered CF. Any number 40 to 60, it's sort of a gray area, and under 40, CF is unlikely. My number is 105. So thankfully, my mother was very proactive. I was diagnosed. I spent a week in the hospital. And although I did not have lung issues until I was about 20 years old, the reason I was in the hospital for a week was it took that long to educate my parents on how to properly care for me. So in terms of proper nutrition, about the enzymes that we have to take, the high fat, high calorie diet. And then the time consuming part was learning how to do physical therapy on my lungs called airway clearance. And at that time, we only had one modality. We had postural drainage, where at night my father would do it, and in the morning it was my mother's turn. And we had 14 different positions where they would beat on my lungs, on my lobes, for 2 minutes at a time to loosen that thick, sticky mucus. Fortunately, my body did not produce mucus until I was in my 20s. But we did the rituals for preventative care. The center I went to and I continue to go to, I turned 54 years old tomorrow. Phew, that's great. I'm still alive. So since I was 8, I've been at my center. And at my center, we really stress proactive work to slow down the disease progression, no matter what your symptoms are. So for all of my life since diagnosis, uh, airway clearance has taken anywhere from 1 hour a day to 5 hours a day. The older I got, the more progressive the disease became, and it just took longer. So fortunately, as a child and early teen, I lived a pretty normal life, aside from taking medicine when I ate. My energy increased upon diagnosis. I started to grow. I started to gain weight. And I was able to hold in that pattern of very healthy lungs until I was about 22. And at that time, I graduated from college as a teacher in elementary school, got newly married, and I think my age mixed with the stress of my career really started to rev up the infection in my lungs. And when I was about 23 or 4 years old, my lung function started dropping from what was about 99%, that's very high normal, to in the 80s. And I started coughing, and my lungs started producing this thick mucus. And at that same time, another very hard side effect when I turned 21 is I actually became diabetic. So it's called CF-related diabetes. So I've been diabetic on insulin for about 30 plus years now. Because my pancreas became so scarred from the thick mucus that the insulin that was produced got trapped and was no longer able to sustain my needs. So the good news about that, for the last 20 years, I'll show you, I actually wear an insulin pump.
Oh, wow.
And the pump acts just like my pancreas. And I even wear something I started last year, sort of hard to see, but it's way up on my arm today. It's a continuous glucose monitor, and that tells my pump every 5 minutes what my glucose is, so that I can monitor that and keep my diabetes in tight control.
Just for the viewers, because I know a lot of people will ask this question, is it quite reliable?
It is extremely reliable. I started with one 10 years ago, and I found that it was not as accurate as I wanted it to be. But with the new technology, it is within the same points as when I check my levels with my finger. So it's a lifesaver because it has an alarm on it. It will alarm me when it's high or low, and I can adjust accordingly.
That's
So
amazing.
it's a lifesaver, literally.
That's amazing. Could you just clarify the name of it?
The name of my pump?
Yeah.
There are many different styles. I choose to use Medtronic. It's made by a company in Minnesota.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
So you got diagnosed with diabetes. Is that because of the cystic fibrosis? You're prone to having diabetes?
Yes, I don't know the exact average. It impacts more females than males. It could be
Oh,
as high as 50%. And it definitely is, it's one of the hardest side effects for me to deal with because it's like having a whole nother set of disease. So
right.
I treat my diabetes. It takes as much time to treat that as it does CF.
Wow. So it's, would you say, in terms of food intake, because as far as I'm aware, with somebody that has cystic fibrosis, they have to have a high calorie diet, which, if I'm correct, is it a high fat diet as well?
It's so the good news, if you look at me today, I weigh 60 more pounds than I did when I was in my 20s.
Right.
So when I started having more disease severity, I weighed about 100 pounds. And I had to eat about 4,000 calories a day just to sustain and try to gain weight. And so when I was in my 20s, I really focused on high fat, high calorie diets. I tried to minimize my carbohydrates because I am diabetic. But with proper nutrition and a lot of exercise, I was able to rehabilitate my lungs from a point in my 20s after growing up with no symptoms. I was starting to become hospitalized twice a year. And that is because the infection in my lungs grew to the point where I needed antibiotics in the form of IV medication. And
Okay.
so usually that lasts 2 to 3 weeks. I started needing that every 6 months. And at that time, I decided that I had to quit my teaching career in order to take care of myself. I was starting to spend about 3 hours a day doing airway clearance to expel all of that thick, sticky mucus. And in my 20s, I would literally bring up 3 cups of infected mucus every day. I did that every day for a year.
Wow. And when you say infected mucus, if you don't mind me asking, would it be like a darker color than like a normal, like a, because as far as I do know, it's like a whitish yellowy color, which is a normal mucus. So what color mucus were you bringing out?
I've got a lot of pictures I can show you.
Okay.
The highly infected mucus for a person with CF can range in color. But when I've been at my most infected state, it is the darkest green you can imagine and is thick, just a like a glob of dark green mucus. Sometimes it's brownish in tint. Sometimes there's blood mixed in it. Um, but when you're highly infected, it's very dark.
Okay. So what would you do? So just say as soon as you see, right, you've got a very dark, thick mucus, would that mean that you'd have to change your medication or change your breathing exercise? What is it that you do?
So the key to living for me has become strategies in knowing how to clear out the thick infected mucus. And for the last 30 years, I've spent anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day doing that. I love variety. And so I can show you some of the tools I use because I've got every airway clearance modality known to man. So these are, you can see that, all
Yeah,
of my airway clearance tools. So each one works a little bit differently, and most people can get access to this.
yeah.
I will show you the cheapest and the easiest. Let me,
Okay,
uh, this
okay.
is called the Pari Pep, and it acts like a straw where you blow into it, and it gives you some pressure so that the mucus can mobilize. So this is one device. Um, this is a device called the Aerobica, And it is a device that helps oscillate your lungs as you breathe into it. And most CF centers in the United States now are recommending this for a handheld device.
Wow.
The device that, I don't know if you have this in your country. Where'd my vest go? I'll show you have you heard of the vest?
No.
So I'll show you that.
Yeah.
The vest is considered the main standard of airway clearance in the United States for people with CF. And I actually just got a brand new model. It's not hooked up to a machine, so I'll put it on.
Yeah.
It's heavy, so it takes just a second to strap on.
Okay.
And the way this works is it actually it percusses every lobe of your lungs at the same time to loosen that thick, sticky mucus. So I'll stand up, you can see what it looks like, and I'll turn around to the back. And there's a little machine here. I'll turn it on. It takes just a few seconds to start, and I'll see, I don't know if you'll be able to see it or hear it, it's pretty quiet, but each of my lobes in the front and back, all 8, are percussed at the same time. So I'll start it up and I'll see. I don't think you'll be able to, can you hear it?
I can hear it, yeah.
So I do this vest several times throughout the day. You can tell my voice is shaking because it's literally attacking areas on my lungs where the mucus is at.
It's kind of like vibrating your body, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
It's like a strong movement for your lungs. And does that like loosen the mucus for you to bring it out?
Absolutely. So it loosens the mucus, it moves it from your smaller airways to your larger airways so that you can use a big huff cough and cough it out.
Oh.
So I've used a vest for 30 years. And I spent 90 hours.
Would you say that's quite effective then? What would you say about that?
I would say that the vest is highly effective, especially if you do a vest treatment. Well, first you would do the nebulizer treatment. So this is the nebulizer that I use. Okay. And I put in a liquid medicine that helps open up my airways. Takes about 10 minutes. And you can do the vest while you breathe in the nebulizer. And then for me, the key to my living has been exercise. So when I was in my 20s, I was getting worse. I was doing everything I knew to do. I was leaving the hospital, and this story changed my life. And it's an example of how bad things can have a happy ending. As I was leaving, I said to the doctor, I don't know what to do. I'm doing everything I can do to fight this disease. And it's not working. And he said, well, research just came out this month that says no matter what you do, you're going to lose 3% of lung function a year. So I went home. I crawled in bed. I became extremely depressed and hopeless. And fortunately, my beloved CF doctor found out that happened. She called me and she said, Robin, I want you to do 3 things. I want you to gain 20 pounds. I want you to ramp up your nutrition. I want you to meditate every day. Find something that your mind can focus on that is calming. And thirdly, I want you to exercise every day. So the next morning, I dusted off my treadmill and I walked slowly. All I could do was about 2 minutes before I became so short of breath. But I did it. And the next day I added minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, to the point where I could exercise for a solid hour. I could swim for a mile without stopping. So for me, the airway clearance with all of these modalities combined with proper eating and exercise was the key to my survival.
And of course, I would also say like your mindset as well. You have to be wanting to get yourself better and of course challenge yourself for you to be able to live a normal life daily. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I realized that I can't control everything about CF. I can't control how much mucus my body is producing. I can't control what bacteria are going to attach within my lungs. What I can control is my attitude and my actions. So if you combine a positive mindset with positive actions, that will help. It's not going to, you can't completely control the disease, but you can certainly move one step forward at a time with those two ideas.
Absolutely. You mentioned something about you had to gain 20 pounds, but also you had to exercise at the same time. Um, was that quite difficult for you to gain that weight then? Because you was constantly exercising, of course, to help your lungs and, of course, the mucus as well. So how did that come about?
That's a great question. I was very aware of eating as many calories as I could to compensate for the loss from exercise. And at that time, I do not use this now because I'm trying to lose weight, but I used something called the Scanda shake. And I could get 500 to 800 calories per shake, and I would do anywhere from 2 to 4 a day. So I would exercise and then I would take a shake. So you're right, it is a very fine balance of trying to eat enough calories to compensate for that which I exercised.
Recently, I've seen that there's a recent medical breakthrough with CF. Could you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Sure. The recent medical breakthrough is actually considered one of the most important in our history of medicine. And it changed my life forever on November 12th, 2019, when I took my first dose of this medicine called Trikafta. Trikafta is pills. I'll show you. You take 2 yellow in the morning and 1 at night. You need to take it with high fat food so that it is absorbed correctly. And Trikafta works at the cellular level to correct the defect in the CF protein. And so if that CF protein works correctly and mucus is no longer thick and sticky and dehydrated, that stops all of the symptoms that the disease causes. And so 90% of people with CF can take this drug. We each, as I mentioned before, inherit 2 genes, so one from each parent. One of those genes has to be called the Delta 508. I have 2 508s, which is the most common, most common for people with CF to have those mutations. If you have one of those, this medicine will work.
Wow.
The medicine is available to most everybody in the United States. It is not yet prescribed to people in other countries, and my prayer and my hope is that in time it will become available to everybody who needs it. 10% of people do not have the mutations that can take Trikafta. Research is ongoing so that they too will be able to have a drug that will help correct their defect, like this medicine. The medicine is made of 3 different chemicals. It's called the triple combo, make up this medicine.
Wow. Okay. And would you say a miracle drug?
It is a miracle drug for many of us because it stops the production of that thick, sticky mucus. Therefore, it stops that vicious cycle that I mentioned. I no longer have mucus and inflammation and infection. And so for the first 4 or 5 days of taking this drug, My cells started working properly, normally, and started expelling cups of mucus. It just like poured out of me with ease. And then on day 6, day 7, after a week of taking the drug, my lungs stopped producing mucus. I stopped coughing. I had more energy. And I've been on this drug now since November, so almost 6 months. And the exciting part for me is 5 weeks after I started the drug, I was tested with a sweat chloride test, which is the diagnostic tool. And my numbers went from 105, which is highly CF, to 26. So my lab result came back, and on it, it says CF, cystic fibrosis, highly unlikely.
Wow.
I have not only gained my lung function, I've gained over 30% of lung function back. I went from lung function of 55% to 80% today, to producing cups of mucus every day to none at all, from 5 hours of treatment every day to 10 minutes of airway clearance treatment for prevention, and still exercise. So my life has dramatically changed, and it does feel like a miracle.
That sounds unbelievable with such a drug like that, where you were just telling me not long ago that you produce so much mucus daily to nothing with this drug.
Yeah. And to have no mucus and to have all my time in my life back and my flexibility that I've never had, I really don't know what to do with it yet.
Oh,
It
bless.
is such a new normal for me, and it's beautiful.
Of course. So, because I remember on Facebook, I saw somebody had a meme about a cystic fibrosis on Facebook, and it's something like, we'd love to just wake up in the morning to be able to breathe without mucus stopping it. And I was like, wow, someone like myself who's always moaning about the littlest things ever, for someone like yourself that's got cystic fibrosis, just breathing is like a big
Yeah.
thing. So, I mean,
It is incredible for me to wake up in the morning, be able to take a deep breath as I get out of bed, and then not have to go do an hour of treatments to be able to leave my house. So to be able to jump in the shower, take a quick shower, and actually have time to put some makeup on, because I don't have to do lung treatments anymore, and be able to leave without all of that prep work and all the energy and time that it takes, it's unbelievable. And then to be able to be out for 5, 6, 8, 10 hours at a time and not have to do a treatment and not worry about if I miss a treatment, I'm going to be set back. I was to the point in my disease state where I had to do some type of airway clearance every 2 to 3 hours. And now I can go 24 hours without coughing or producing mucus. It is a miracle.
wow. Well, that's going to lead me on to coronavirus, because, of course, somebody like yourself that got cystic fibrosis and reading up on coronavirus, it seems like the coronavirus will trigger people like yourself that suffer from such a disease. How did you feel when you heard about the coronavirus coming into the United States?
Well, to be honest, it took me a couple of weeks to fully understand the impact of the coronavirus and how it was going to dismantle our normal living. Our state, I live in Ohio, and our state, by around March 14th, started issuing mandates for our safety. Our schools started closing down. People were starting to work from home. And still at that time, I was not aware of how rapidly my life was going to change. And then actually that weekend, I went out of town. as all of this was starting to shut down, I thought I had made plans. I had stopped touching people that week. So on March 10th, I was aware that I was not going to touch anybody if I left my house. I was going to make sure my hands stayed off my face. I had the hand sanitizer with me. So I did every preventative protocol I knew to do. And I got back from vacation that weekend. And on Tuesday, so two days later, I started with this dry cough. And it was a cough unlike any of my other previous times in life. It was not an asthmatic, hacking, wheezing cough. And it was not a cough that was loose and full of mucus. It was just a short, repetitive cough that would happen a couple times an hour, and then it would stop, and then it would occur again. I didn't think much of it. And the next day, I woke up, I could breathe deeply, I could breathe easily, and I was on the treadmill and I was watching our governor, who was educating people about the symptoms of the virus. And I turned it off and I felt a lot of fatigue. And at first I thought, I think this is mental stress. I'm feeling very tired. I'm going to go lie down. And within 30 minutes, I started to feel warm. And so I took my temperature. And my temperature had moved from 99 to about 100.4 within a 30-minute period. And then it clicked. And I thought, oh no, I think I've got three symptoms. I've got this dry cough, I've got fatigue, and now I have a fever. And so immediately I called my CF center and I told them of my symptoms. And they ordered a test for COVID-19 the following morning.
Wow. That's amazing. So you got tested straight away?
Yes, I got tested very early on. I fortunately, because I had a pre-existing condition, I was able to get tested. I went to the hospital where my treatment center is, stayed in my car. I stayed in the parking lot. They came to me. It was a quick nasal swab. And the hardest part of that time was then I had to wait 5.5 days to get the results. So during that time, I assumed that I had the virus, even though my symptoms were very mild. I self-quarantined. I stayed away from my husband. I kicked him out to the guest room. I wanted to protect him. And I did everything in my power to not spread the disease. I knew at that point I had a choice. I could again control my actions and my attitude, just like I did when I thought I was going to die when I was in my 20s. Because I felt well enough and my fever with Tylenol completely stopped, I was still able to have the energy and the strength to exercise. And so in my mind, I drew on all of my past experiences with every other hospitalization, and I've had about 30 of them in my life. I drew on the knowledge and the wisdom of my past. I knew that it was going to be most important for me to keep my airways clear. So even though the new drug Trikafta stopped me from producing mucus, I knew that it could start again, and I knew that that mucus settling in my lungs could cause pneumonia. So I started doing my airway clearance treatments every 3 hours, even though I didn't have mucus in my lungs anymore. 2 days later, so this is on day 5 of my symptoms, my lungs once again started producing highly thick, infected, dark green, dark brown mucus. So I just kept doing my treatments every 2 to 3 hours to keep my lungs clear. I felt well enough. I still exercised. I made sure that my diabetes was taken care of in terms of keeping a very tight a tight handle on my numbers, because whenever you get infection of any kind, your diet, you can your glucose can rise. So I made sure that I was eating properly. I stopped eating carbohydrates. I started drinking a lot of, I was told to drink warm fluids. So I drank a lot of warm tea, had a lot of water, and I exercised 3 times a day because I still felt like I could. I was not that sick. So with all of that combination, I was able to expel that mucus so that it did not set in. And finally, on day 5, I got the confirmation call that yes, I did test positive. I was in the mix in the middle of doing everything I needed to do to care for CF. And so I just continued. I got extra sleep, I ate healthy, airway clearance, pushed the fluids, and exercised with a mindset that was positive and hopeful. I got back into that meditation that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And for me, I made a choice. Immediately when I hung up, I took from the call where the nurse told me I was positive. I immediately started to cry from fear.
Cool.
And I thought, I've made it this far. This is not going to get me. I'm going to survive this and I'm going to fight this just like I've done my entire life. And the hardest part was finally, after 53 years of getting rid of that dark cloud that surrounded me and followed me, that fear of death, Trikafta, the new drug, eliminated that. And I had a choice. Was I going to let that dark cloud surround my thoughts again and invade my energy? No, I decided to release it, to stay positive. I chose a mantra that I would say throughout my mind, like, I am strong, I am capable, I can fight this. And when I got worried, that sentence or those words flashed through my mind. And I was able to remain positive, which gave me hope to fight.
Absolutely. I mean, for somebody like yourself that seems like has been battling every day for just to breathe, and for something like coronavirus to just suddenly come, of course you would get pretty emotional, especially when recently you found such a miracle drug and then all of a sudden you've got this dark cloud over you. So what was the atmosphere like at home with your partner and your daughter?
How was the environment, did you say?
Yeah, so how was the environment as soon as you got the news about that you have been tested positive for coronavirus? I mean, how did that make your husband and your daughter feel?
Fortunately, my daughter does not live with me, and so I felt like she was safe. And mentally, I've been through a lot in my life, but I've never, ever put my problems onto her. I wanted her to be a child. I didn't want CF to impact her life. So although I told my daughter that I tested positive, I didn't really bombard her with any other mental information. My husband and I chose to separate physically in terms of having no contact, even though we still lived in the same house. He was working from home, so I spent a lot of my time in a separate part of the house. And the hardest part for me is I've not been able to see my parents since March 14th. My dad has very severe Parkinson's disease, and I would go 5 days a week to help care for him. So that has been the hardest change for my life, not being able to spend time and help my mother, who is his main caregiver. Fortunately, I did not visit him when I was most contagious with the disease, which we think we are most contagious 2 days prior to the onset of your first symptom. So thankfully, I knew enough not to go visit him then, and they are completely safe.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that with me. Um, of course, with the coronavirus, you have obviously beat it. You're probably one in probably many, but quite lower numbers compared to the deaths that we have had. How has that made you feel, and how has that given you a positive impact on how you see life?
Being able to beat COVID with ease makes me feel a couple different feelings. The first feeling that I experienced, of course, was extreme gratitude. And I still wake up every morning. I feel like now I have a third chance at life. Trikafta gave me that second chance of a new miracle. And now that I was able to get through COVID, it's even a third time around. And so my heart is full of deep gratitude. Secondly, I felt guilty, almost like survivor's guilt, asking myself, why was this so easy on me when other people who are much healthier without preconditions are struggling and dying? And I decided that that is something that I could control. I could reframe my thoughts of that victim mentality to one of gratitude. And it brought back a memory that I want to share with your viewers that is very important to me. Years ago, when I was struggling with my disease progression, and I would ask my doctor questions, she said to me, Robin, sometimes we don't know the answer why. And so I flashed back and I remembered that conversation. And I said to myself, I don't know why I survived this with ease, but I do know that I can choose to live my life moving forward with positivity, with grace, with hope, and with love for all humanity. And in that decision, I am so excited to tell you that last Friday, after working on this for a month, I was able to donate 600 milliliters of my plasma that has antibodies for COVID-19 to two people who were struggling on a ventilator in a hospital. And the hope is that those antibodies will help them fight this disease for full recovery. I am so grateful for that.
Wow, that is so big of you to do something like that. That's amazing. What made you make that decision to do something so nice?
It was an easy decision for me. My parents raised me with the understanding that love is the most important part of existence. And I do believe for me, there is a higher power, and that higher power for me is divine, loving energy. And as humans, we are called to both give and receive love. So I knew that the decision to share my plasma was the most loving gift I could give to another individual right now. So the decision was easy. The process in getting there was a little bit tricky. In the United States, the FDA mandates to be able to give plasma, you have to fall into one of two categories. One is you have to be 14 days symptom free with a retest that is negative for COVID, or 28 days symptom free without a retest. Well, I've been retested twice, even after 28 days of being symptom free, and I'm still testing positive for COVID. But because it was 28 days past, I was allowed to give my plasma. And I felt humbled and full of love and life during that process.
Of course.
I actually, the place that I chose to donate to is a 2 hour drive from my home because they are the forerunners in plasma donation in my area. And I
Hmm.
went the first time on a Monday, and we tried both veins, both arms, and it didn't work. And so they said, I want you to go home and super hydrate with a lot of fluid and come back. So I did that for 4 days. I drank so much water, my bladder was going to explode. That super hydration of drinking like 15 cups of water a day enabled my veins to easily flow that blood so that within a 30-minute process, enough plasma was taken that would help 2 people.
That's amazing. That is very, very kind of you to do something like this. Thinking about it is one thing, but actually going out there 2 hours away from home to actually, go ahead and pursue the whole thing is another thing. So that is absolutely amazing. And I feel honored to speak to somebody as positive and somebody like yourself. Just to wrap up, just one last question. What advice would you give to people that are suffering from the coronavirus? And what do you think they need to beat this virus?
I think if I was giving advice to somebody to beat COVID, I would first ask them to remember that each person is a unique individual. I was taught years ago by my CF doctor to never compare myself with anybody else. And so turn off the news, stop comparing yourself to others, to start that positive mindset to be able to endure the hope that is needed. And then depending on how aggressively the disease is impacting you, if you are able, keep moving, exercise, even if it's just walking, get out of bed if you can to prevent pneumonia from setting in, if you're able. Try to eat nutritiously and try to drink a lot of fluids. Get adequate rest. Stay home, stay safe, stay away from people, and do something that will not just nourish your physical body, but nourish your spirit. Whether that's reaching out with a phone call to somebody, reading an article or something that brings you hope and joy, doing something to integrate your mental, your physical, your emotional, your spiritual needs so that you can continue to move in that positive realm no matter how difficult the physical becomes.
Absolutely. That is very, very strong words that you've just said. And I'm pretty sure people that would be watching this would be inspired by you. And of course, you're a big inspiration to many out there. And you should be very, very proud of yourself.
I'm very thankful that I was born with a personality that is very easily compliant. So it's always been very easy for me to follow the orders of my cystic fibrosis team. And they have been with me my entire life from diagnosis. And when I got the COVID diagnosis, we were in contact every day. And they are my rock. They helped me with suggestions and ideas. And along with my CF team and my family and my friends, I was able to survive with ease.
Absolutely. You need the people around you to help you. I totally agree. Of course. I would like to say a massive thank you for your time, your effort, and of course showing me all the equipment as well. I would like to wrap up and say a massive thank you to your husband as well. And I want to wish you all the very best for the future, and of course stay in touch with me as well.
Oh, thank you. I am so honored that we could speak. And tomorrow when I turn 54 years old, I'm going to take a drink and toast to you.
Of course. Thank you. Well,
I am glad to be alive.
The whole team from Share Your Story with Syma would like to wish you a massive happy birthday.
Thank you. And I'll leave you with these final words.
Yeah.
Make every moment count.